3 women left their homes to run errands. One needed medicine for a sick relative. One needed washing powder. One was on her way to class. None of them came back. Their cars turned up in busy parking lots miles away in places where everyone was just passing through, where a car could sit for months without anyone asking questions. Their families asked questions. For decades, they asked questions. What they got back was silence, until one day an arrest was made, but not for anything they could have guessed. This is their story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we are joined by Melinda Hale.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, last week we really dove into a complicated story.
We were talking about the disappearance of 3 women, all connected to one man, but then you left us on this cliffhanger.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Imagine a writer and podcaster doing that to us.
Who would do that?
Who would? Me.
The audacity.
Before we get into this week's episode, I just want to remind our supporters and listeners that Vanessa and I have a Patreon for She Goes by Jane.
We do. And until recently, we were doing little show notes, little letters that each of us wrote about feelings about each episode that we talked about. But with the first half of this episode, we changed to doing it as a bonus episode. So now you can go on and listen to us having a discussion about our thoughts, which I think is a little bit more fun.
Yeah, so you get to know Vanessa and I a little bit better in our personal perspectives on the stories that we're sharing.
Yeah, we don't always have time to express our thoughts during an episode recording. Also, I don't know if everybody wants that, but for those who do,
there's a space for you.
There is a space for you.
But if you kind of want a little sneak peek or get to know us a bit better in our perspective.
Because you're all having thoughts, so maybe see if you feel your thoughts might align with ours.
Yes, and that's also a place where you can also leave your thoughts as well.
Which is very cool.
Yes. So we need to cover a lot of ground because this was definitely something that as I started working on this episode, I sent Vanessa a message and I was like, don't worry, it's just going to be a 1 part.
And then
I messaged her back yesterday and I was like, I take it back. I just think that in order to cover a story with this much time that has passed between cases and with 3 missing women, and also particularly, I want to make sure that 3 missing Black women get the kind of coverage that they deserve. I don't want to rush through this.
Well, that's what you said. You're like, there's 3 women and a sting, and I want those women to get their fair part of this.
Yes. So part of this episode, we have one of the most bizarre stings that I've heard, but I also wanted to make sure that we knew about the women before kind of that takes up some of the air in the room. So
right. So now we can get on to this weird part.
Yes. But to kind of cover where we are, because if you're just joining us for this story, we're heading back to the dirt roads and lost stories of mid-Pinellas County, Florida. Now, for 15 years, there was a dark pattern that was winding its way through this rapidly changing landscape of the Largo, Clearwater, and the primarily Black communities of Baskins, Ridgecrest, and Dansville. 3 women, each from a different background and circumstances, would go missing. Margaret Dash in 1974, Retha Hiers in 1982, and Donyelle Johnson in 1989. Now, Margaret was a church-going married mother of 4. Retha was a Spitfire who had a longtime partner until a recent marriage before she disappeared, and she was a mother of 6. Donyelle was a young college student described by her friends as beautiful and intelligent. Despite these differences, they all had one thing in common. All 3 were intimately connected to a charismatic local preacher and prominent asphalt contractor named Cleveland Hill Jr. And when they disappeared, there were few clues as to what happened, except that all of their cars were eventually found in kind of busy parking lots.
No women found.
No women. In this tight-knit and still racially segregated communities of Baskins and Ridgecrest, people were whispering. They feared Cleveland. They depended on him for jobs. They watched his paving trucks lay thick black tar over the old orange groves. They and their families had once worked, and many suspected that the truth lay beneath the concrete and asphalt that Cleveland was pouring. But when the law finally came for Cleveland Hill, it wasn't with a warrant for murder. It was with a case of Coca-Cola.
There's that cliffhanger I was talking about.
The Coca-Cola.
The Coca-Cola.
To truly understand what's happening, you have to know that by the 1980s, Cleveland was wielding a lot of power and influence in these communities. In a 1986 article, Cleveland was described as one of the wealthiest residents of the Ridgecrest area. That year, the newspapers had done a piece on his quest to purchase the Omni Center, which was a local community center that had closed, and he wanted to reopen it as a nonprofit. He expressed concern that there were so many drugs flowing through the community, largely, he thought, because the young people just didn't have enough to do. At the time, he said, "I would love to get this community center. I would like to reorganize and have a program to train the Black kids and teach them how to become independent and free from drugs, free from gambling, and free from drinking." While this goal wouldn't come to fruition, it was clear that what he was proposing would have been transformative for this community. But it was just as clear that he had risen to a level of influence in the community, acquiring wealth, running several businesses, and employing community members in those businesses. In some ways, he kind of became untouchable. People were reluctant to speak out because of his position, and law enforcement seemed disinterested in pursuing investigations against him for these missing persons cases. But all of that would come crashing down in 1990 with an investigation few could have predicted. And this is the part that Vanessa has been waiting for. Okay, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department began a new narcotics division headed by Sam Lynn, who had resigned his position at the St. Petersburg Police Department specifically to head up this bureau. So this is a big deal. Their goal was to identify who the players were in the local drug trade and reduce the amount of drugs flowing through Pinellas County. And that's when they pinpointed the Hill brothers, Cleveland and his brother Henry, who they began to suspect were drug kingpins in this area. Specifically, they were investigating whether or not the brothers could be involved in the crack trade in the Baskins and Ridgecrest neighborhoods.
So things are starting to make sense now, because we just, in that first episode, really only focused on his treatment of women and a little bit about his power in the community. But now we're seeing a different side of Cleveland.
I think it's particularly interesting placed against his stated reasons for wanting to open in the Omni Center, which were an anti-drug crusade.
And now we're getting into this. I have other thoughts of that, which we will discuss in the Patreon later.
And we can do that. Now, the initial plan was simple. The undercover agents would conduct a straight cash for cocaine transaction with the Hill brothers, which would have netted them an arrest or two, depending on which brother took the bite. It wasn't elaborate, but it would be a quick win for this newly started narcotics bureau. But when they interacted with Henry Hill, they quickly learned that he was actually disinterested in that type of transaction of cash for drugs. Instead, he wanted to receive stolen items for the cocaine. Initially, these transactions bordered on what I would call bizarre. Agents found themselves trading things like smoked hams, meat grinders, children's clothes, washers, and dryers. But during one of the exchanges, Cleveland suggested something else: soda. Specifically, the trade of classic Coke for cocaine, or, if you will, Coke for Coke.
You are having fun with the Coke for Coke thing, aren't you?
I was.
Yeah.
At the time, the wholesale cost of a case of Coca-Cola was $6.40. So the undercover agents were planning to sell the Hill brothers soda at $3 a case. In vending machines at the time, these were selling at 75 cents a can.
So were they going to use this Coke to stock vending machine?
Yes,
Okay.
because there's a third man involved, and this is Anthony Peter Castellano, who worked and owned Bay Vending Company in Tampa. So it's a 3-person kind of situation.
Okay.
So this is a very sophisticated but still risky situation. The undercover agents are selling them soda at what is a massive loss already, less than half of the resale value. So if they were sold individually, a case would gross them $18 a case of revenue once sold in the vending machines. By trading Coke for soda, they were effectively transforming their illegal drug supply into a profitable cash-generating asset. So this is what I would call money laundering adjacent. So normally laundering means taking dirty cash and running it through a legitimate business to get it clean, but the Hill brothers cut out a portion of this because by selling the soda through the vending machines, they were generating pure, clean cash from the very first drop of a quarter. Plus, it gave them a perfect rolling alibi. If a state trooper pulled them over, a truck bed of classic Coca-Cola or smoked hams, for instance, wasn't going to trigger an automatic search warrant. When undercover officers initiated the first Coke for Coke swap, they started small with just 50 cases of soda, and they gave this whole operation a name called Operation Real Thing.
Like the Coke commercial?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Now, when they offered this 50 cases of soda, Cleveland literally laughed in their faces because he bragged that he was a veteran at this and he had once moved a single shipment of 18,000 stolen cases.
I can't even wrap my head around that amount because how many Cokes are in each case?
Yeah.
And there's 18,000. Like, how long would it take that to go through a vending machine? How many vending machines do we have?
Well, so if you're in the Tampa area and it's spread throughout all of Tampa,
yeah,
right?
It's just, yeah. What the Hill brothers are trying to pull off here is quite big.
Yes. And this is what they did in the past. So in response, the federal agents, they aggressively upped the ante because they knew they had kind of seem more legitimate in this. So first they did 1,000 cases of soda, then another 1,000 cases of soda. And finally, they laid what they felt was the ultimate trap, a massive logistical delivery of 5,000 cases of soda. And in exchange, the Hills would hand over $13,000 in cash and 350 pieces of crack. Now, the operation was no longer a localized sting. So this is a massive web, and Cleveland Hill Jr. is driving his empire straight into it.
I have another question. Because, okay, these are investigators getting all this Coke.
So to actually make this happen, though, investigators actually, with this big delivery, they actually had to enlist the help of a local bottler and trucking company to donate the soda and the trucks to be used in the sting. And they also emphasized the bottling company would get their cans and the trucks back. Like,
it's really funny. So
such a massive amount. Right?
So it's like a temporary loan?
Yeah. You know, Vanessa, you're just trying to visualize this.
Yeah.
So 5,000 cases, and any of our trucking listeners, you can correct me if I am wrong, but from my understanding, 5,000 cases of soda equates to roughly 3 semi-trucks full of soda.
See, that's the perspective I needed.
Yeah. Now, the undercover agents, they're going to meet with Cleveland Hill and Anthony Peter Castellano at a shopping center parking lot in Tampa. And generally, Castellano was seen as the financier behind these operations. So he's the one coming up with the cash. Now, this is a tense moment. The trucks, they have to be in place, and the money and the drugs had to be exchanged between the parties to make this work. And it did. As soon as the money was exchanged, the handcuffs came out. Shortly after, Henry and his wife were picked up back in Pinellas County. Cleveland was charged with 3 counts of sale and possession of crack cocaine, 1 count of trafficking crack cocaine, 2 counts of dealing in stolen property, and the use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Henry was charged with 3 counts of dealing in stolen property and 1 count of trafficking crack cocaine, and their associate Castellano was charged with 3 counts of dealing in stolen property and 1 count of trafficking crack cocaine. We'll be back in a moment. During the whole operation, They also arrested 17 other people who were largely considered street-level dealers who had worked for the brothers. This case would take nearly 2 years before Cleveland finally stood in front of a federal judge in the Coke for Coke scheme. Cleveland, he's not there because of the rumors that had circulated around Baskins for decades. He wasn't there for the 3 women who had disappeared from their lives, leaving their families with so many unanswered questions. He was there for the drugs he'd been running through those same communities. In 1992, he was sentenced to 19 years for conspiracy and possession with the intent to distribute cocaine. As the prison doors shut on Cleveland in 1992, the state got its conviction, but the families of Margaret Dash, Retha Hiers, and Donyelle Johnson were left holding nothing but silence he left behind.
It's kind of incredible because I do really believe that drug control within the community is important, but shouldn't the women have been just as important? If they had been that important, this could have been handled sooner.
So my understanding is Operation Real Thing takes place over the course of just 1 month. So they have this newly started bureau, and they're like, we're leaning in hard. We're going in hard on this. And within the month, they're able to collect all the evidence that they need, get all the things in place to make this happen. And Vanessa, as we continue, you're going to learn more clearly some of what was ignored during this investigation that has to deal with the missing women.
Okay. Part of me is like, if we had a bureau that worked only on the missing women and
like where could
victims
we be?
that were half as dedicated as these guys were, what would that look like?
Exactly. Now, once Cleveland Hill Jr. is locked away, the neighborhood begins to open up a bit more about the rumors, but that doesn't mean everyone in the community is on the same page. One of the reports was that Hill employed as many as 15 Baskins area residents in his legal businesses. And in an area with fewer economic opportunities, this was a massive amount of support. One of those employees, Nathan Bostic, spoke to reporters in 1993. He said, he's hired a lot of people. He helped people financially by giving them work. He helped them keep their cars, loaned them money. He's good for here. On the other side of the coin was a man named Joseph Crawford, who was also talking, this time to detectives. Crawford said that he had once worked for Hill and once saw him dig a large hole before dawn. Now, Crawford wouldn't reveal where this was or give details about what he saw, likely because he was scared. Crawford worried that talking to law enforcement would jeopardize his children's safety and said, quote, Hill has the power to get anyone, any place, at any time.
There are really these two sides of the coin with Cleveland, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why I was like, oh, we really need to understand this neighborhood to understand what's happening, or at least as much as we can as outsiders. And what people were saying is that at least one woman was buried at 1201 Baskins Crossings at a property Hill used to own there. With Hill in prison, Leon, Margaret Dash's husband, had gone to Police Chief Sid Klein and directly asked him to review Margaret's case and look into this rumor. He did, and by 1993, they were digging on the property. Clearwater police spokesman Wayne Scholler told the Tampa Bay Times in 1993, he approached us with a desire to see this case re-examined. That led our detectives to the sheriff's cold case squad, and information was developed that led us to look at the lot. Everything here is speculative now. The dig began in April, and over the course of 3 days, investigators uncovered a 25-foot by 60-foot section of the lot, removing brush and junk before digging into the ground. They found trash, they found chicken bones, they found fish bones, but they did not find any sign of the women. Now, as this was happening, locals were watching from a nearby road as the digging began, and some of them chimed in stating that the dig happened at the wrong spot. So this is actually interesting because it indicates the neighborhood knew enough to know that the digging isn't in the right place that everyone had been talking about.
That's very interesting.
They said that if there was a body, it would have been buried behind Hill's building, not beside it, and that area had since been paved over.
Things have been noticed, I guess, right?
Yeah. Now, when they decided to discontinue the search, Leon told reporters, I'm somewhat disappointed. I would like for this thing to be over. We've been living a miserable life all these years, not knowing where she is, whether she's dead or alive. Though the search had been specifically for Margaret's body, Howard, Retha's husband, spoke to reporters about his own trauma of living without knowing. If she's dead, he said, I'd like to know it. Not so much for me, but for the kids. But that didn't mean the heat was off Hill. Separately, a clue surfaced. An FBI agent involved in the 1990 drug sting had forwarded a tip to the sheriff's department in 1990 from an informant. That informant had said that they overheard Cleveland talking on the phone to someone, and that this call took place sometime between December of 1988 and January of 1989. The informant reportedly heard Hill say that he was going to, quote, get rid of the bitches just like before.
I know it's a serious statement, but sometimes when you say things like that, it gets me for a minute. I have to remind myself that you're quoting.
Oh, that is true.
It is so not an Amy thing to say.
Now, the informant also said that they'd seen a large pool of blood near the cooler area at the general store that Hill owned, and evidently this information was not followed up at the time of the drug sting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
we just ignore that?
Because their quest was for the drug conviction.
Wait, right? They saw that? Wait, so who saw that?
So this is an informant who they spoke to in the process of getting ready for their drug sting.
But the blood was there during the sting?
No. So this is, they have someone who came forward.
Okay.
And spoke to them at the time of the drug sting. Okay. And said, hey, I overheard this phone conversation, and also, hey, I saw some blood at his store.
Okay.
Now, the drug sting got this information, and they claimed that they forwarded it on to the sheriff's department to look into. But because their focus was on drugs, they were not pursuing those details that they were told. Now, later on, a Pinellas Sheriff's detective named Patricia Jewell, she searched records trying to find this informant, but she couldn't find that person.
So she saw it and she was like, wait a minute.
Like, we had this detail.
What about this blood?
And so she wants to hear more, get more details from this person, but is unable to locate that person. So while locals had long suspected Hill had something to do with the missing women, law enforcement just kind of finally seemed on board to look too, but not until 1993. Detective Jerry Harper related a conversation he had with Hill. Harper said, I tell him, Cleve, one day someone is going to dig up one of those women. I'm going to nail you. All Hill would do in response, though, when he said this was laugh.
Ew. Okay.
Lieutenant Norman Romanowski added his own thought, voicing what many thought. There was no reason for any of these women to walk off the face of the earth. There's no reason why they'd be missing. Hill would serve out his sentence at a federal prison in Atlanta. When he was released, he never returned to Florida, the place he'd had so much sway over for decades. By 2018, word came that Cleveland was in hospice care in Virginia. He had stage 4 prostate cancer. Investigators knew if they were going to get a deathbed confession, they needed to act quickly, so they traveled to Virginia for one last interview with Hill. Despite the fact that his death was looming, Hill refused to confess. They tried one more time, putting his son Tony on the phone. Do you know what happened to those women, Pops? Tony asked. No, I don't, Cleveland said, and he was tearing up and shaking his head. Now, years before, Cleveland's daughter, Tanisha, said that Betty Jean, Cleveland's wife, had asked that same question. That time, when Betty Jean had asked, Cleveland said, if you keep messing with me, I will tell you what happened to those women. I can make people disappear.
Very threatening.
Well, you can see the stark difference in reaction, right? Now, 2 months later, Hill would die, taking any confessions he might have needed to make with him. In 2022, Habitat for Humanity was slated to turn the lot Hill once owned into affordable housing, and investigators knew this was their chance to search there one more time. 30 years after their initial search, investigators returned to the property. now called 1201 Gooden Crossing, renamed after Chester Gooden, the community leader who had founded the neighborhood grocery store on that corner. Clearwater Police Detective Joseph Rulin gave confirmation on why they returned to the property. "We knew he did it," he said simply. Like the first search, this one yielded no clues either. Donyelle's aunt, Janie Smith, stood watch over the dig and reflected on Donyelle's disappearance, telling reporters, "When I had my kids, she was there for me. I miss her so much." But despite the failure to find any women at this location, it did give Retha's daughter, Dana, some measure of relief. Dana said that she had driven past those lots in Baskins for years, wondering if her mother was buried somewhere on the property. The 1993 search had seemed incomplete to her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her mother might still be there. With the 2022 dig, though, she could feel the shift. "I got some closure," Dana said. "I can ride by that lot now and not be bothered by it." Every family member connected to these women has been impacted in different ways. Dana said that when she was younger, she had once seen a photo of a woman on a beach and she thought that the woman looked like her mother. So she'd taken her dad's car and driven to Clearwater Beach and searched along the water looking for anyone who looked like her mother. When she didn't find her, she sat in the front seat of the car and cried. Dana never had a place she could mourn her mother, so she turned to the beach into a memorial site. Every December, on the anniversary of Retha's disappearance, Dana drives down to the beach with a bouquet of red roses on the passenger seat, and once there, she offers the flowers to the Gulf of Mexico and thinks of her mother. "I need a proper place in the ground," she said. "Anywhere that's not a proper place." Margaret's daughter, Elaine, also looked for her mother in every stranger she passed. "Not a day goes by that we don't think of her," she said. "Every time I see a group of people somewhere, I find myself constantly looking for her. I need to know if she's dead or what." Her father, Leon, did the same. "I look for her every day," he added. "Just the other day I saw a lady who walked like Margaret, so I turned back around to see her face. It wasn't her. I don't think I'll accept the fact that she's dead." And to all the families, alongside not knowing what happened to their loved ones, is the lingering feeling that more could have been done to find them, that more could have been done to bring justice to the families. Derica Wilson, CEO and co-founder of Black and Missing, concurred. She said, "Frankly, there's no sense of urgency in finding them. They're Black. Nobody is going to miss them. That's the perception. And it's absolutely incorrect." So as the years pass by and the memory of Cleveland Hill's control over that part of Florida wanes, I want to make sure we're not forgetting these women. Their names are Margaret Dash, Retha Hiers, and Donyelle Johnson.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, Pinellas Green, read by Melinda Hale. Melinda is an award-winning actress, filmmaker, singer-songwriter, and storyteller based in Los Angeles. Working across film, television, music, and digital media, her work explores themes of identity, humanity, faith, race, and emotional connection through cinematic storytelling and character-driven narratives. Most recently, she starred in the feature film Bull Street alongside Loretta Devine and Amy Madigan, and made her directorial debut with the short film Curtain Call, which screened at festivals internationally including Bend Film Festival, Gaze International LGBTQIA Festival, and Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival. Her second short film, Au Gratin, starring Tiffany Daniels, Loretta Devine, and Jay Donnell, was selected for the Poppy Jasper International Film Festival and Wyoming International Film Festival, and will also screen at the Light Reel Film Festival in Washington, D.C., and the Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival in August, an Oscar qualifying festival. She is also the founder of JMV Entertainment, a production company focused on developing film, television, and media projects rooted in meaningful storytelling. Before expanding into filmmaking, Melinda built a career as a singer-songwriter and performer, releasing multiple independent projects and opening for artists including Smokey Robinson and O-Town. Her music has appeared on television, including CBS and Disney productions, and she has performed for audiences ranging from the Los Angeles Dodgers to the California Democratic Convention. Across every medium she works in, Melinda is passionate about telling stories that create empathy, challenge systems, and connect people more deeply to one another.
Pinellas Green. Margaret Dash, 38, missing since June 14, 1974, from Clearwater, Florida. Retha Hiers, 43, missing since December 29, 1982, from Largo, Florida. Donyelle Johnson, 21, missing since April 4th, 1989, from Pinellas County, Florida. The days pass by at the corner grocery store, where the sun shimmers on the asphalt, the deep corners of the porch the only shade, and the sweat beating cool on the sides of every soda can the only relief in sight. Down in Pinellas County, there are no citrus left in the fields, no heady scent of oranges coating the picker's hands, no deep patches of pine where the summer light flickers through. The lurk and lurch of tractors have gone silent. Now, cul-de-sacs loop and curl where the earth was once turned over every year, renewed promise with each turn. Now, the highways slit past, taillights cutting through the night, red streaks of warning for a county grown cold. Out on the dirt roads, people still remember, while the empty lots grow over with palmetto and brush, and the corner grocery closes its doors. Here, the women still hold hands, linking them against the silence, waiting for the ground to be overturned again. Beneath the roots, something is still trying to rise, and so they say their names into the dark and wait for it to answer back.
For more information about our show, please visit shegoesbyjanepodcast.com.
Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.